This is a guitar that I bought about 20 years ago, about 2000. It was the first electric guitar that I bought. It's an Ibanez RG 270DX, which is very much one of the entry models when it comes to Ibanez. I was into some pretty dodgy music about 20 years ago, and this was the kind of thing that the dodgy musicians that I listened to would play, and so I wanted one, and so I got myself one. But I've had it for about 20 years. It's looking a bit worse for wear. It's certainly incredibly grubby. So I thought I'd give it a bit of a clean up. But also, having watched quite a lot of a YouTube channel called Crimson Guitars, a guy called Ben Crow, who does up and builds some awesome guitars, I thought I'd have a go at it myself. So I thought I'd finish this one using a heat gun. I've never seen it done with a heat gun in the way that I'm doing it before. But I've seen it done with an oxyacetylene torch like this. So it was all a bit of a risk, but I figured I'd use my cheapest guitar as a bit of an experiment to see how it all worked. So that's 20 years worth of filth built up on some of these things. Screw heads, generally speaking, pretty rusty. The caked salt, sweat, and so on. It's degraded a lot of the metal parts, like those bits on the back that hold the big screws in, the bolts that hold the neck, various other bits and bobs. And it just needed a really good clean up. I'm with Satan, I am Prince, the TCM stickers, all these stupid things. Time to get rid of those, I thought. TCM was the Chewy Middle, which was a band that I had with some guys from school about 20 years ago. So screwdrivers out, get rid of all the bits. Give it a bit of a clean up, strip it off, hopefully don't rip this bit when I take it off. Oh, thank goodness for that, didn't rip it, wonderful. Now I've never taken a guitar apart quite to this degree. I mean, I've taken them apart in order to clean them, but generally speaking it's more of a sort of looking after it type job rather than a complete rejig. So this one was a little bit daunting. I'd never really taken it quite this far. That screw incidentally was really bent, which was annoying. Now I tried not to be lazy, but ultimately I ended up at some points being a little bit lazy. For instance, this next bit here where I turn up to chop off, where is it? Where's the bit? The ground wire on the claw at the back there. I couldn't be bothered to get the soldering iron out, so I just chopped it with a knife. That's one little ground wire. Oh, pretty clever there with my Sharpie, writing on the bits so I knew which way round the thing should go. There you are, I just chopped it because I was bored and lazy. Well, I wasn't bored, what am I talking about? But I was lazy. The input on this guitar has been dodgy for probably about 5 or 6 years. I mean, that's the level of laziness that I've engaged in. It's just been a bit sort of rattly and loose, so one of the things that I did when I sorted this out was to try and fix that up. Now, I initially thought I might be able to just remember the wiring on this, but that was a little bit over-optimistic. So what I did in the end was I resorted to MS Paint, one of the finest programs known to man, and I drew the wiring diagram. I know this isn't a particularly normal-looking wiring diagram necessarily, but it got all the right colours of the wires and so on. Oh, I had Henry on me at the time and he fell asleep, which was good because that meant I could actually get the soldering iron out and start taking bits and pieces apart. But yeah, did a bit of a soldering, a bit of a wiring diagram, built this ridiculous contraption to hold the bits and pieces so I wouldn't have to, and set about taking things apart. Now, it took me a while to work out that I should probably have my phone on some, because I was recording this all on my phone, have my phone on some kind of tripod, or at least a stand. So I was doing all of this one-handed for most of the first half of this video. It was only later on that I realised it might be a good idea to set it up on a stand. So pull all the bits and pieces out, detach them all from the various different pots and switches and all the rest of it in the rest of the electronic gubbins. Here are all the bits. Fantastic. And here's this guitar, this maroon or burgundy or whatever it might be. Make everything nice and tidy. Line everything up. Start cleaning it. So I took off those stickers, scrubbed it down, and the same with all the rest of them, just got it all off there. It's quite therapeutic, this, it was quite nice. Quite enjoyed it. Ended up using a bit of Windoline, seemed to work quite nicely. This thing was gross. This is the bridge. I took it apart completely because it was just so disgusting. This is definite proof that I was winging it. I put a bit of copper slip on these bits to try and make sure they wouldn't stick. Not sure whether it's the right thing to do, but don't think it damaged it or anything. Lovely and clean. Look at this, like magic. Oh, that bit's clean now too. Wonderful. So I put it all back together. I decided that maybe a bit of oil on there might be a good idea. Again, no idea if that was the right thing to do, but it's certainly what I did. Clean that up. Magic. Look at that. Beautiful. Now this thing was corroded. It was wobbling around. Got out my spanner. Turned that nut over, and it looked great. Look how clean and shiny that is. Look at those stupid stickers. Took off the stupid stickers. Turned out that that one had left behind a bit of a mark, which was a bit annoying. I'm not Prince. Wish I was. These frets were looking pretty bad, pretty gross. They'd been years of use had left these little indentations in them, and they were almost green towards the end. So I thought I'd protect the fretboard with a bit of tape and get the sandpaper out, which is also what I did to these. Ferrules, I think they're called. Ground down the top of each of the screws to get rid of the corrosion and the rust. Make them look a bit nicer. Which I think worked quite nicely. Then I thought, maybe I'll oil these up too, so I did. So after that, headed outside, got out the heat gun. And like I said, the stupid mistake I made was not thinking it might be a good idea to have the camera on some kind of stand. So what I was doing, as well as using the heat gun, was I had a scraper, like a paint scraper. And I'd heat up the outside, which was like some kind of, wasn't lacquer, I don't think, it was some kind of sort of polyurethane, but there was some kind of varnish underneath it, so it didn't come off terribly easily. You had to get it really hot till it cracked, and get the scraper and just hack at it. Now, definitely left scorch marks on the wood. I wasn't too bothered about the scorch marks on the wood because of the finish I was going to give the guitar in the end. Got out the file. Got my file out. RGs, Ibanez RGs, have got quite sort of rectangular, right-angled edges, and I didn't really like that. I wanted to soften it up a bit, so I got out the file and sort of scraped down the edges, and then through various grits of sandpaper I sort of smoothed it down until it was a little bit more rounded, a bit more sort of strat-like. Still has those slightly pointy bits on the end, but I think it's a little bit softer, which I quite like. This is cool. I enjoyed using this as a mouse sander. Look at that wibbling and wobbling. So at this point, what I wanted to do, I wasn't, like I said, not too bothered about the scorch marks. Oh, tidy up, very important to tidy up. I wasn't too bothered about the scorch marks. What I wanted to do was make it nice and smooth, give it a nice even surface for when I started basically setting fire to the outside of it. Took it all the way down to, well, I used 180 and then I got a little bit of 2000 wet and dry paper just to really take the edge off it. But look at that, it's nice smooth curves. That's looking much nicer now. Didn't bother taking the paint off the inside because a lot of it's shielding paint, and just couldn't be bothered to do that. And then got out the heat gun and started doing this. Now the point of doing this was to, well, I had to cover up the scorch marks that I put in place when I took off the previous coating. But also I wanted to sort of burn it up to try and bring out the wood grain a bit. Now there wasn't really much. This is a basswood guitar, as far as I know. So the grain, there's not really much interesting grain going on, but I thought I'd try and get some out by scorching the outside. One thing I hadn't really taken into account was that it wasn't one solid piece. It was, in fact, 3 bits glued together, which was fine at the start. But when I started burning it and heating it up, I think the glue started to split, so I had to whack in a bit more glue in those seams that started to come open. A little bit worried it was all going to split apart into 3 bits, but it didn't, which was nice. Wire brush, start getting rid of some of the carbonisation. This was also quite satisfying. And you could start to see some of the wood grain coming out. The back had some especially nice wood grain. The front was a little more boring, but the back, some especially nice wood grain to bring out with this. Getting rid of the glue was a pain in the arse. I tried a knife, I had a Stanley knife, tried a little just pocket knife. In the end, just kind of rubbing it down with a bit of sandpaper turned out to be the best way to do it. But with using the knife to kind of get rid of the big bits, and then just rubbing it down with a bit of sandpaper. So I wanted to get rid of as much of the carbon as possible, which sort of lightens it up a little bit. And then again, make it lovely and smooth. Look at that beautiful grey. Again, make it lovely and smooth by sanding it down with increasingly fine sandpaper. So I think it was 120, then 180. Don't know what that one was, for about 600. And then finish it off with a bit of 2000 just to really get it going. Found a bit of sponge, thought I'd give that a go. But look, some of the wood grain started to come out. It looks quite nice. I was quite pleased with it at this point. At one point I thought maybe I'd just leave it like this, just leave it with its bare wood. But did a bit of reading and I found out that it probably isn't a good idea. It starts to dry out a bit and it's not great. Best thing to do is to oil it up. So I got on to Crimson Guitars, got some penetrating wood oil. Here it is, finishing oil from Crimson. That bit earlier on, I couldn't find a hook, so I had to sort of make do. So I got this screw and this old bath chain, so I could hang it up after applying the oil. But this made it look quite nice. I was quite pleased with this. So this was the first coat. And again, it helps to sort of bring out the grain a bit. So you apply it, wait 5-10 minutes, that kind of thing. Rub it off, hang it up, wait. I waited maybe 2 hours for the first one, 2 or 3 hours. Second coat of oil. Starts to look quite cool, sort of violin-y type colour. Again, leave it 5-10 minutes. This is the back. Leave it 5-10 minutes. Rub off the excess and then leave it to dry. After the second coat, I left it for a good 48 hours actually. And then I wasn't sure whether this was a mistake. I got a bit of wet and dry before applying the third coat, just to try and sort of make sure it was nice and even. The selector, the pickup selector, the bit of plastic on the end of it was lost a long time ago. So I got a little wooden ball from an old puzzle, drilled a hole in it. I was quite pleased with that. And I thought that's a bit grotty, so I sanded that down a little bit. Final coat was done, so I did about, I think I did 3 coats of oil in the end. A little bit of a rub, and then it's time to reassemble it. So I got the pickups back in through the holes. Tried to make sure they were all the right way around. Because I'd written on them in Sharpie, like some properly organised person, it wasn't as difficult as it might have been. The single coil can only go in one way round, so that was easy enough. This one was a pain to try and get through the hole, because they'd already had the green wire and the black and white wires from the other 2 pickups. This took a lot longer than the 3 or 4 seconds that it's made to look like on the video. That was really annoying. The ground wire, which comes in here and then screws down onto the shielding paint there for the single coil. Try to stop it being too noisy, which seems to work. It doesn't seem too noisy. I do a bit of a demo of the guitar at the end, and I think it sounds all right, actually. I think it's okay. This point I needed to turn the guitar over, so I just put in a screw, just one screw into each, just to hold them in place. I didn't want to get them tied down yet, just in case I needed to release them and do anything to them. So anyway, turn it over. Got my bike light out, try and make it so I could actually see something. And then, yeah, started putting everything together again. Had to strip a bit of wire, twist a bit of wire, tinned a bit of wire. Had to take that bit off because I was lazy earlier on. Ended up having to do it anyway, of course. Put a bit of solder on your wire. I've been told this is a good thing. It seems to make it easier to make it stick to existing solder. Now, my soldering skills leave a lot to be desired, so please do not copy what I do here. But oh, this was this really bent screw. I considered replacing it, but I thought I didn't want to get the thread wrong. I didn't want to rip into the wood too badly, so I did actually keep it. But it's pretty bad. It's pretty bent. I don't think it'll make any difference though. That bit back in, and then it was time to start soldering everything back up onto the pickup selector. Have my beautiful, well-made wiring diagram that I consulted here. Oh, this is the point where I've worked out how to set my phone up on a stand so that I didn't have to hold it, so I'd have 2 hands free, because it was going to be far too difficult to do it with just one hand. Get the screws back in for the pickup selector, screw them back in place, get those nuts on, tighten them up. This is fascinating stuff, I'm sure you'll agree. So this was when I had to put the little plates back on the back, and I discovered that the oil finish had basically made it too big. Watching this footage back on this bit, I'm so lucky to be alive. How did I do it like that and not slice my wrists open? Took the opportunity to sand it down a bit, sanded it all in one direction to kind of give it a bit of a finish instead of being nice and shiny, to give it a bit more of a matte finish. Oh, I wanted to test out that I'd done the wiring right, so I just got this set up and tapped on the pickups with a spanner. Turned out I had done the wiring right. You have to trust me on that, because I didn't have it set up connected into the phone or anything. Put these back in and it fitted wonderful. I sliced it all down, made it fit. How exciting. So wiring all done correctly so I could get the pickups all screwed back in properly, so got them all down, managed to work out which screws were which. Now this stuff, this Yoo-hoo, I thought was nice industrial strength stuff. It was some kind of vegetarian glue. It was a bit rubbish, so I'm probably going to have to put that, re-glue these bits back in. It wasn't very good, and you can see here it's already started to come unstuck a little bit. Anyway, time to put the bridge back in. This is where things went a little bit wrong. I've been told the best thing to do was to add a bit of oil to the bit where the bridge sits against the posts there, just to make sure that it's nice and smooth without too much noise. Got my springs back in. This is a Floyd Rose floating bridge, so you've got to try and get it lined up perfectly with this particular style. You've got to get it nice and flat. Ooh, that was a crunchy noise when the neck went back on. I was a little bit worried about that, but brazen through it. I'm assuming it's fine. It's fine. Get the screws back in, get the neck bolted back on. Managed to get them all lined up properly, which was surprising. Got them nice and tight, and look, we have a almost complete guitar just without strings on it. The bridge is all the way down. Get my big box of guitar strings. Now I decided to go for something quite heavy. Like I said, this was drop C, so I went for 11 down to 64, which might seem a little bit extreme, but gives a nice. It sounds nice. It's good. It's nice having thicker strings. I like having thicker strings. They sound more beefy. Now, did the 32 first. Didn't want to start with the bottom or the top string because I wanted to make sure that it was being pulled from the middle. What I don't include in the video is that you can see it bent over on the right hand side there. I couldn't actually get the big thick 64 gauge string in through the hole of the bridge, so I put it in as far as I could and then I had to sort of fold it over it. I'm pretty certain it's going to hold in place. But yeah, I don't think these things are designed to have such thick strings on them. I had to adjust the truss rod a little bit and the height of the bridge slightly to make sure it was all playing nicely. But that was it. Get everything screwed back in place, get the strings in, put the truss rod cover back on. Because it's a Floyd Rose bridge, you've got these locking nuts, get them in place. Snippety snip, make sure you don't snip through the actual strings, just the bits that are dangling off. Get these bits back on for holding on to your strap, and look at that, beautiful. Isn't that lovely? I was quite pleased with that. Certainly looks a lot better than it did before, I think. Look at that wood grain. If only that was on the front. Now I'm going to show off a little bit.